Hi guys, it's Pete from MyJewelryBench.com. Today what I want to do is work on this 18 size pocket watch that was sent to me from a customer. Customer's complaint is the watch doesn't run anymore and doesn't know why. So I've taken a good look at this watch and determined that A, it had a broken mainspring, and B, it was very, very dirty. First thing I want to do is to start the disassembly process. Taking the watch apart, if done carefully, is very easy. And we're just going to take all the parts out and put them in a parts tray, keep them categorized with the corresponding screws for each part. Here you can see I'm taking the main barrel bridge off, and we're just going to pull those apart and put that in the parts tray. There's our mainspring barrel. Next thing I want to do is loosen up the dial, so we'll take the dial screws and loosen those up and gently pry off the porcelain dial. Grab that pinion. And here I'm just tightening up the dial screws to keep them in the movement. Some people have mentioned that I seem to manhandle parts, which brings me to my next point. I seem to have triggered a few people, and that triggering has caused them to accuse me of manhandling the parts to the point where they think I'm going to damage them. I think over a few years you'll get used to using the parts. And they're not delicate little things that, like small alien life form, that I'm going to blow up or kill by manhandling them. Remember, most parts are durable on a watch. There are certain parts you do want to be careful of. The hairspring is one of them. That's the most delicate part of a watch. Some of the click springs are very delicate, and you should handle those with care. And of course, always handle the pallet fork with care. But most of the parts here are made of steel, and they will hold up very well. This watch has a broken mainspring, so we're going to replace it with a brand new mainspring. After winding it in the mainspring winder, we are going to make sure that our winding barrel fits into our mainspring barrel and just wind that up. Always remember, after you've wound a mainspring, it will pop out of the mainspring winder. So just use a little caution when handling that, because you don't want that to pop out of there and go flying across the room, or it could actually hurt you and cut you. So once that spring is in, I'm going to put the barrel pinion in, and then we will put the barrel cap on the mainspring barrel. Once that's done, I'm just going to tighten it up with a pair of parallel pliers. This way I don't damage any of the mainspring barrel. I'm not touching any of the gears or teeth, and just exercise caution. Before you put the barrel cap on, just make sure that you've oiled the mainspring with some spring oil. And now we'll just start reassembling the watch. First thing I want to do is check any click springs that need to be done, and I will begin the process of putting the gears in place. If a gear is going to be left in that particular spot, I will apply a little oil to it. And here you can see I'm just fitting each of the gears in position. Okay guys, I just want to let you know about a big accomplishment I made this past week. We are now set up for shipping and handling, so if you're interested in getting your watches repaired, possibly even having them filmed and put on YouTube, let me know. You can go to our Facebook page, which is at facebook.com/myjewelrybench, all one word, and you can post a direct message or a private message there directly to me, and I will get back to you. Pictures of your watch, as well as what you think is wrong with it, help me tremendously to give you kind of the best quote I can from a distance, and then we can make arrangements from there to get your watch serviced and sent back to you. Again, that's facebook.com/myjewelrybench, all one word. And once I have this clutch piece in position, I'm going to put the cap and screw back in place. And you're just going to use a little, you just got to remember that these are sometimes reverse thread. In the case of this particular screw, it is a reverse thread. And we'll just check everything to make sure it works and adjust the springs to make sure that all the parts for the setting and winding system are all good. Again, with these click springs and release springs, just exercise a little caution. You don't want to pull them out, you just want to make sure that they work well. And I'm going to put a little oil on the springs where they make contact with the setting parts and the lever for the setting and winding. Once that's done, I begin the assembly, and on a full plate watch like this particular 18 size, I actually put the gears in on the back plate or the bottom plate of the watch instead of the top plate. And the reason I do that is because it's easier in this particular instance, an 18 size with an encapsulated pallet fork. I can put that on the bottom plate or the back plate of the watch much easier than I can putting it into the top plate and wiggling the case back and forth to try to fit it together. So in case you're wondering why I'm assembling the watch gears or the train onto the back plate, that's kind of why I'm doing it. And you'll see in just a minute where I grab the pallet fork and put it into the opening where the pallet fork makes contact with the balance jewel. Again, just exercise some caution when handling the train because each of these gears pinions is very delicate and you don't want to damage any of them, so we're just going to be a little bit gentle with these here. And there's the pallet fork, and you can see that I'm just going to grab that and put it in place. It's kind of hard to show you on camera. On an 18 size full plate watch, this is kind of the point at which things get a little hairy, and I really couldn't keep my hands in view of the camera here. I apologize. What I'm doing is I'm taking the upper plate, the plate that's underneath the dial, and I'm trying to set it on top of the bottom plate with the gears in position. So you have to be very conscious of the center wheel, which has a longer pinion on it, as well as the second hand or third wheel, which the pinion for the second hand protrudes about 6 millimeters up from the plate, so you want to be careful when putting those in the watch. And then I'm going to use my fine tooth or fine nose tweezers, and I'm going to very, very gently work with each of these gears and get them in the correct jewel and getting the pinions in place without doing any damage. This can be time consuming, and I didn't bore you with the video, but it took me about 5 minutes to get each of these gears in position with both plates seated correctly. And once I did that, you can see now I can screw it back together. So I'll take the 2 screws, and there's only 2 screws that hold both plates together. I'll put those in position and tighten these up. Now, if you have any doubt that your gears are not in the correct position, do not tighten the screws all the way. Double check as you go along. Once I know that the gears are seated in the jewels correctly, then I can move forward. Now, I tend to oil as I move forward so that I don't miss anything, but you will occasionally miss a little spot, and if you think you did, just take a look under a loop and just double check. So here I'm putting the winding gear in place, and that's the gear that actually winds the mainspring. Well, once you seat the barrel into the winding gear, you may have to use a watch winder or anything that you have that'll wind it to get that gear to turn a little bit and seat correctly onto the mainspring barrel pinion. So just keep that in mind. It'll probably be elevated the first time you put it in, but once it's seated, then you'll know it. You can see it's lower than the bottom plate, and then you can put the barrel cap or barrel bridge back in place. And of course, it's a full bridge movement. Full bridge movement is identified by the fact that all the gears are covered and all the movement is covered by both the top bridge and the bottom bridge. And of course, once everything is settled, I will screw everything back together and tighten up all the screws for the bridge plates. This is a good time, now that I've got everything together, to go put a little oil in each location where the pinions come through the jewels, and that's what I'm doing here. Once the top plate is done, I will move to the bottom plate. Don't over oil your watch movements. Basically, over oiling them can actually cause more problems in the future than under oiling, but you'll kind of pick this up as time goes forward. Now that the movement is assembled, I'm going to wind the mainspring. Sometimes I'll just wind it a little bit, sometimes I'll wind it all the way. It depends. Now this is a brand new mainspring. It's oiled. The movement's oiled. I'm pretty confident that I can wind this fully, so I will give it a full wind. Now sometimes you may hear somebody say that my watch is wound too tight, and I know I've mentioned this in the past, but winding a watch too tight is not actually something that truly happens. What that means is typically the mainspring, either on a watch or a clock, is so dirty that it will no longer release and turn the mainspring barrel. So when you wind a watch to 100% and the barrel doesn't move, there's usually an issue with the mainspring. Again, it's dirty, broken, whatever, it's got an issue. But you can't really overwind a watch, especially in automatic. So here you can see I'm gently placing the balance cock with the balance wheel attached, and I'm giving it a quick test to see if it turns, and we're doing okay here. In this case, I did put a little dab of oil on the upper and lower jewels for the balance staff. Again, I'll just go in there and I'll just put a little oil on the pallet jewels just to cover that. That allows the pallet and the escapement to work a little more smooth. And the contact between the pallet fork and the escape wheel are what make the ticking in a clock or a watch. Now that I'm happy with the watch movement, I'll move on to the next step. So here what I'm doing is just loosening up the dial screws. There are 3 dial screws in this particular plate, and we have 3 dial feet on the back side of the dial. If you have a porcelain dial and it has a small hairline crack in it and it shows some dirt, you can put that in an ultrasonic cleaner for a couple of minutes, then wipe it dry, make sure that it's clean and free of debris, and you'll notice that the ultrasonic cleaner will remove most of the debris within a porcelain crack. Now there I just set the canon pinion back onto the center wheel, and now I'll put the minute wheel on, and we'll grab the hour wheel. Make sure they're seated correctly and all the teeth are in contact with the corresponding gears. And don't forget your dial washer. Typically on an American pocket watch you will have a dial washer. It's very rare you don't see one. Dial washers allow the hour wheel to stay separated from the back side of the dial, and it allows it to move much more freely. Once those gears are all in place, then I can place the dial back onto the watch. A little sorry for the overexposure here. And my dial screw is a little too tight, so we're going to loosen it up a little more and just make sure that the dial feet fall into place. Once the dial is nice and tight along the upper part of the top bridge, I can tighten up those dial screws, and that allows the dial to remain securely in position. Most of the Waltham and Elgin 18 size watches are pretty durable. You can do a lot to these watches. They will hold up for a good long time. And even if they're dirty, they'll run well. These are big, bulky springs that run these watches, and they tend to run really, really well even when the watch is dirty. You'll notice that the time probably is a little off in the slow side, but these are durable watches. Here you can see I'm just inserting the movement back into the case. I start with the stem, making sure it falls into the clutch. Once that's done, I can grab the case screws and we can tighten the movement to the case. Remember, case screws are always mounted on the back side of a watch and hold it firmly in position inside the case. So with this particular watch, it's been serviced so many times over the last 110 years or so that the case has actually gotten a little wear dimple in it where the case screw is attached to the case, and it's caused some beveling on the case. The screw itself no longer holds the watch movement in place in the case, unfortunately, so we have to use, in this case, a watch clamp along with the case screw to hold the movement back to the case, and that won't interfere with the back cover of the watch, so we're in good shape here, but it is going to keep the movement firmly mounted to the watch case itself, or the frame of the case. And the lower case screw, that one is fine. There's no wear in that section of the case. So guys, here's a good time for me to ask you to leave a thumbs up if you like this video, and if you are not a subscriber, please consider subscribing. It helps grow my page. And if you have any pithy little comments or requests, please leave them in the comments section below, or go to our Facebook page and leave a comment there. I appreciate you guys watching. Hey, I'm almost up to 2,800 subscribers. It's the middle of June, so I've appreciated everything that you guys have done to help my channel grow. You can't possibly know what it means to me. I do appreciate it a lot. And now we're rounding the corner on this watch restoration here. This watch is running perfect, so it's a good time to get everything back in position. So I first start obviously with the hour hand, and we will get that stuck onto the hour wheel. And I'm just going to lower the hour hand so that the top part of the hand meets the top part of the hour wheel, and no lower than that. We don't want to cause any friction between the minute hand and the hour hand, so you're going to leave a little gap of about maybe 1/10 of a millimeter or 2/10 of a millimeter. So I move the hour hand, in this case we move it to the 12 o'clock position, and then I'll set the minute hand in position. And then you can see I'm using the flat side of my tweezers just to push that onto the center wheel, and then the canon pinion holds that in position. Now for the third most delicate part, putting the second hand onto the third wheel pinion. This pinion is rather long and it is a little delicate, so you want to be a little conscious of that. Don't put too much pressure onto the second hand, because you know, if you use brute force here, you can break that third wheel pinion and you will no longer have a second hand. These watches are getting old and a little harder to find parts for, so keep that in mind. You can see it's a lever set, and I have the lever pulled out so I can set the time. And there we go. The watch is just about fully assembled. I'm going to throw the front cover on here, and we'll call that a wrap. The Elgin Watch Company was here in America mid to late 1800s up until World War II, when it was dismantled and parts and tooling was shipped to Europe. Elgin watches are pretty cool. They're very collectible. They don't bring a lot of money. I've seen some go for a couple $1,000s depending on condition, but mostly 18 size, they'll sell for $100 to $400 depending on their condition and runtime. This is a 17 jewel. It works pretty good. I'm very happy with it. I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Take care and have a great day.